New research from the Travel Foundation suggests that if we want to meet net zero targets by 2050, passengers will have to subsidise the cost of expensive eco-friendly aviation tech by forking out first-class prices for short-haul flights. But if prices are to treble, then your well-earned holiday to Alicante in the school holidays will become £5,200, or your weekend trip to Budapest becomes £1,200 instead of £400. And it's not hard to imagine that your children might not be able to afford to go abroad by 2050, because taking out a second mortgage on your home for a short trip to the continent just isn't feasible. So on that note, Vox Populi Vox Dei, we asked you, the people, will net zero be the end of low-cost travel? And the people have spoken.
No, travel is ingrained in our society, it's ingrained in our mindset. We like to go on holiday. We get rubbish weather here, so the only way we're going to get good weather is by going on holiday, so air travel is definitely here to stay.
Literally 2 days ago looked at a trip to Barbados, which is coming in at £8,500, which would have 2 years ago probably cost about £3,500.
I can see people paying $1,500, $2,000 and $3,000 to travel for short holidays to Spain and Portugal.
I'm studying here for my degree, so in the future it would be a shame for students who are trying to study abroad and get an opportunity in life to really excel in their career. So I feel like climate change, if it were to impact opportunities of students studying abroad, it would do so negatively.
Back with me are my brilliant panel, the esteemed historian, Dr David Starkey, and the enormously engaging but socialist former Labour MP, Mr Stephen Pound. Well, he's quite a social socialist, it has to be said. Stephen, do you think it is reasonable in the effort to get to net zero to make cheap travel expensive travel?
I think there's a certain justification. Look, whether it's going to happen or not, I don't know. I mean, my children are 32 and 34, and nothing could have kept them from Magaluf or Ayia Napa. I think they would have got there somehow. That's the reality. But look, the thing is, this idea of a holiday being somewhere where you go to is a sort of comparatively modern construct. I think Thomas Cook started temperance outings.
You're quite right.
And I think the first ever outing on the London Underground was actually to see a public hanging, which is a shame Lee's not still here. He probably would have been in favour of it. But that was, of course, the privatised London. But look, one of the most polluting forms of transport is ocean vessels, ocean ships, and which is a bit of a worry to people of my age who look to cruises as a rather a good thing. What I'd like to see is people realising that there are very, very good holidays to be had at home, and the idea that you have to travel to find. Travel broadens the mind. It broadens, a number of things. No question about that.
These insufferable, tedious pieties. What you're really saying is that you want us to go.
I want to go hop picking. That's what I want.
That's right. You want us all to settle down, stay at home, avoid spending things, go back to being neo-peasants tied down to our villages. I believe in a conservative modernity. I believe in improvement. I believe in broadening of horizons. I think there is this self-flagellating, I know you Catholics tend to be rather keen on that, but this self-flagellating quality about the whole ecological movement. It is, remember, the entire foundation of where we are now. The technology, the lights, the comfort, the broadcasting is cheap fuel. We're going back to the 18th century. We escaped from windmills. We are rapidly going back to windmills. And we must face the truth. Net zero will involve a terrible cost in freedom, in opportunity, in lifestyle, in everything that we've come to take for granted. And there's a fundamental dishonesty in not admitting it.
Stephen, what I want to ask is, can you get anyone to vote for this? You and I have both been successful at elections. We've both been in Parliament. I still am. Do you think constituents will vote not to have cheap holidays, and therefore can governments do this even if they want to?
They don't need to,
Hold on.
because we've always... Sorry.
Let Stephen get a word in edgeways. Come on. We'll come back to you, David.
I think, look, I always used to say that, my constituents are more worried about 8:30 than 2030, and, they tend to think about the immediacy. But the reality is that we've got snow in London tonight. We've got bizarre weather that's happening. We had the driest February on record, the hottest summer on record. Look, I think no serious person can deny that there is something pretty frightening going on with the climate of this world. We've got to do something about it, and I don't think anyone can. And I think if actually taking holidays closer to home or even at home is part of that solution, I could sell that on the doorstep.
I think you couldn't. And the point that I was going to try to make...
Let's try it out.
Your question was wholly misconceived, because you have got absolutely nothing to do with climate change policy. That is dealt with by an unelected committee sitting under the Lord Debden. And you politicians, sit there, beg to be told what to do, and you do it. There is no intervention of democracy whatever in this process. And indeed, it's one of the fundamental problems with the whole way in which we are governed. You have nothing to do with the setting of interest rates. You have nothing to do with something as fundamental as climate change. You've nothing to do with the operations of people talk about the problems with planning. That's one of the principal reasons is Nature England under Tony Juniper. These absurd rules about bats and newts. There is no... So it is a really important point. There is no democratic intervention in these things.
Can I just say there is... look, let's have a couple of examples. 25, 30 years ago, we used to have a thing called acid rain. Acid rain would sweep in from the east. It was decimating forests in Scandinavia. The European Union, a sensible organisation, legislated against that, and particularly in filters
I thought we were talking about democracy.
There is. We actually elected people to the European. Another good example.
Oh, you are so funny. You are a parody of the position.
Another good example is lead in petrol. I mean, we now know that without any doubt, lead in petrol was causing damage to young people's brains by legislation, by elected legislators in the House of Commons and in the House of Lords. We banned it. We can do something about it.
This is absolutely true, and Lord Brooke, when he was Home Secretary, brought in the Clean Air Act. So, yes, democratic legislators can do things, but I just don't think that voters are going to accept, in spite of what David is saying, a system where they can't have their choice.
They will accepted.
Look at the rise of UKIP. When people are told they get no choice, they vote for somebody else. That's the strength of democracy, and politicians will come forward.
UKIP simply terrified the Tories. UKIP never got more than...
Oh, but it changed policy, didn't it? And we left the European Union, and now the place behind me actually has real power once again. We could not...
You don't use it, you're frightened.
Well, the Home Secretary announced that we were going to use it today, which is something we would not have been able to do in the European Union. We're going to have to finish. You're going to have to go on Lee's show and discuss this with him next week. But thank you both. My panellists are great fun.